Ben, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure to be here. Kim, thanks for having me.
Okay, let's first talk about the big blackout that happened in Europe. So, a blackout that knocked out Spain, Portugal, parts of France. The reports are, we don't know what caused this. We're not really sure what happened. And now they're even kind of looking at maybe it was a terrorist attack or maybe it was so they don't really know. But you seem to know what happened, what caused this big blackout in Europe. Can you explain what it was?
Sure. The explanation that is coming out of the official electricity group in Spain is that they say extreme temperatures caused a atmospheric oscillation which induced voltage inconsistencies in the high wire lines. Now, everything but the first part of that is true. There was certainly an induced electricity event in the atmosphere, and it definitely was the cause of these blackouts, but there was no extreme heat whatsoever. It is true that they just went 100% renewable, which is less reliable, but that is also not anywhere close to an explanation for what happened here. We are in the middle of a magnetic pole shift here on Earth, and this has been ongoing for several decades. It's been speeding up and speeding up, and in recent years it has kind of crossed a threshold where it is pretty concerning at this point. And one of the things that is happening is it is letting dangerous amounts of energy from outer space into the atmosphere and into the Earth system. If we were to completely lose our magnetic field for good, we would end up looking like Mars. That's actually what happened to Mars. That's not what we have on deck, but on this planet, we go through these relatively short-lived, but still very, very relevant magnetic pole shifts.
And can you explain what that means? Like, just kind of break it down for dummies. Like, what is the magnetic pole, and what is it? Does that mean the Earth is literally going to flip?
There's a very good chance that something like that is going to happen towards the end of this, but primarily what we're talking about with this event just has to do with a magnetic shift rather than a geographic tilt.
Okay.
What this essentially means is Earth has a magnetic bubble around it called the magnetic field, the magnetosphere. And this protects us from solar flares and supernova and gamma rays and cosmic, all that scary stuff that you've heard about from space. We have a protective shield around our planet. And all of those scary things from space, with maybe the exception of asteroids, a meteor strike, all of those scary things from space are electromagnetic energy. So this magnetic field wrapped around our planet is the perfect protection, like a cocoon, against that dangerous energy. But every few thousand years, the magnetic field kind of glitches out a little bit, and that's what's happening right now. It started very slowly several decades ago, and it has been progressively getting worse and worse and worse. And one of the things that comes along with that is we lose the protection. It kind of gets a little weak. Not necessarily everywhere all at once, but there will be weak spots that pop up. There will be sort of holes that form that allow this energy to come through. It's actually what we see in the beginning of the movie, The Core, which is about Earth's magnetic field failing. Now, the majority of that Hollywood film is just complete sci-fi nonsense. But what they show at that one point where there was a weak point that allowed that energy to come in, and it took out power, it was burning things, people's pacemakers all stopped in that city at the exact same time. And so that was actually pretty accurate given the fact that it's a Hollywood sci-fi movie. And that, to a certain degree, is what just happened in Europe. When I heard their explanation about the atmospheric oscillation and the problem with the high voltage lines, I instantly ignored their explanation about there being extreme heat. First of all, because that's not possible to cause that kind of thing. And second of all, because it took 2 seconds to look and see there was no extreme heat anywhere in Europe. It was maybe half a degree above normal. And normal for Europe in April is just not that hot.
Right.
And so I started looking at some of the data on what's happening up at the top of the sky. We actually have pretty sophisticated ways of measuring and monitoring how much of this electromagnetic energy is getting past that magnetic shield and actually interacting in the atmosphere. And you could see it coming straight down through the top layers and integrating into the atmosphere. Now, when this happens, it's never a direct line of sight kind of thing. It comes down and then it shoots out to a side somewhere. And it usually goes where the wind is going, which is not all that hard to understand, especially since water is pretty conductive. Water and electricity tend to attract. And in the wind flowing in a given direction, that's where all the water is flowing. They detect electric currents when there's water flowing underground. So you may have heard things like this, but it's the same basic idea. So over the North Atlantic, you can see this energy coming down through, and it was a pretty preposterous amount. And I take a look at this data fairly regularly. This was more than we're used to seeing when the sun actually causes one of those solar storms that lets us see the northern lights. You know, that happened in May and October of last year. What happened yesterday morning was actually to a significant degree stronger than that, except the sun didn't do anything. It was a weak spot, a hole, a crack that opened up in Earth's magnetic field and let that energy actually come into the Earth. And I sat there and I watched it. It came down through and then it followed the wind, which was pointed right at Portugal, Spain, and northwestern France. And this energy signature began first thing in the morning as soon as dawn broke, which is when all of the problems began with their system. There is no way to cause this specific kind of issue with hacking or an EMP or terrorists or anything like that. If it's hacking, you basically get a system shut down or something like that. You don't get everything is working, they're just not in sync anymore. Like if you need to have something that comes and bangs together, like I know this is kind of weird, but let's say this is what's needed in order to keep something going. If they miss each other, that's a big problem. And that's actually what happened. But that can't happen from hacking or an EMP or anything else like that. Not to mention the fact that, you know, people's cell phones that they were on, people who had Starlink internet, they could still get that. So it wasn't an EMP, it wasn't hacking, it wasn't anything other than exactly what they said happened, just not for the reason that they said it happened.
Why do you think that is? Why do they not know the reason you know?
I think they have.
Let's talk about ivermectin. For decades, it's been a trusted FDA-approved medication to treat parasitic infections, but now it's caught up in political games. Here's the reality. With a new virus emerging from China, wildfires in California, hurricanes battering the southeast, being prepared...
Absolutely do know it, and they're just lying about it.
Why would they lie about that?
Because if they told the truth about what's happening on this planet tomorrow, nobody goes to work. Truckers aren't driving hundreds of miles to deliver food. Police aren't risking their lives on a potentially dangerous call. The world falls apart the very next day if they tell us what's going to happen. There'd be chaos, anarchy, and we would destroy everything that you would want to save, that you would love about civilization. It would be over the very next day.
But I mean, isn't this kind of like the notion of climate change, which, you know, we can get into a little bit later. But, you know, so they say, okay, there's doom and gloom coming, right? They've been telling people for decades now, climate change is coming and everybody's going to die, or the planet's going to be ruined. I mean, they've been saying this and we're not panicking. So wouldn't it be similar to that, where it's, okay, yeah, the magnetic field the poles are shifting. It's going to take a while. Don't panic. But I mean, I guess the difference with climate change is they have an agenda, right? To tell us, like, this is what you have to do in order to prevent it. Like, they've got a plan, whereas I don't know what kind of a plan they would come up with for how do we stop the Earth's magnetic, shift.
Yeah. So, first of all, there are some people who are panicking quite a bit over climate change.
No, I know, but I'm just saying we're not seeing like chaos in the streets where people are like, oh, that's it, the doom and gloom, so we're not going to go to work.
So think about it. Half the people on the planet right now remember when they were trying to tell us that an ice age was coming.
Right,
and so
yeah.
most of those people are like, these idiots don't know what they're talking about. I'm not going to get scared about this.
Right.
Then you have people who, can understand some basic stuff about science. They can see the results of some of these global warming policies, and they're like, there's too many holes here. And so basically what we're left with is about 10 to 20% of the population terrified over climate change, and only about 40 or 50% of the population even believing anything they have to say at all.
Yeah. But I mean, how quickly would this magnetic shift happen? So that's what I'm saying. Like, climate change, the story is, in a decade, we're all going to be doomed. How long would we have if they came out and told us the truth? Look, this is what happened. How long would we have before we're in a dire situation? I mean, is this going to happen in our lifetime, do you think?
It'll happen before 2050.
So explain what it would look like.
Okay, there's no more electricity on Earth. We are back in the Stone Age. There's no way to purify water. There's no way to distribute it. You turn on your faucet in your home, nothing comes out. There's no refrigeration, so food can't be stored and shipped. Within about 48 hours, the stores are completely empty. Gas stations don't work. ATM machines don't work. Credit card machines don't work. 911 doesn't work. There's no internet, air conditioning, heating. There's basically just you and everyone around you back in the natural world, looking to eat, looking to get water, and looking for shelter for their family. The other thing about this is when the sun actually does throw one of those storms at us and our magnetic field is much weaker, the induction of electricity onto this planet is going to be much, much stronger. Picture we get hit by the sun, and within 24 hours, every electrified structure on the planet has burned down. That's homes, buildings, hospitals, everything. Just burned down in one day.
So you think it would happen in a moment like that, in a day?
Well, what I just described to you would.
Yeah.
The overall magnetic pole shift is something it's been going on for several decades, and it's going to take probably a decade or two more to complete. It's about how bad things get along the way. It's kind of like, all right, so when somebody ends up dying of cancer, are they running marathons every day, and then they just drop dead in the middle of a marathon after they're sprinting like an Ironman? No, that's not what happens. They notice first they don't have a lot of energy, and then they're getting too sick, and then other things start to go wrong in their bodies. I mean, maybe an organ of theirs starts to fail, and it's a slow process that they go through to actually die from that cancer, right? That's a little more accurate if we're talking about what's going to happen in this event. So as our magnetic cocoon of protection fades, this energy comes in, and first it does two things. One, this energy, because of its interaction with water vapor, is going to create tremendous storms. Absolutely phenomenal storms. And phenomenal, not necessarily in the great use of the word. Mind-blowing levels of storms. While it's doing this, that is electromagnetic radiation that is not exactly good for our DNA. It messes with all of our bodily systems. A lot of people don't know this, but everything from blinking to our heartbeat to taking a step to talking to thinking, all of it has to do with what they call ion channels. Basically, things moving around that are electromagnetically charged. This would be sodium, magnesium, calcium. There's several others. And there's a reason we call those things electrolytes, because they are electrically charged. And we actually notice, to a smaller degree, every time the sun causes one of those solar storms like we had last year, the more vulnerable aspects of the population start to see their electrolytic activity inside their body be messed with quite a bit, whether that's something in their mitochondria and they're extra fatigued, whether that's something in their neurons and they become more emotionally unstable or more panic reactive, something like that. It can trigger a heart attack. It can induce autoimmune diseases to flare up. It can cause seizures, migraines, etc. And so this is one of the things that is happening. It also degrades cognition. So if it seems like the world right now out there is getting a little dumber while at the same time becoming more emotionally unstable and more panic reactive, yes, they are. And there's a scientific explanation for it. And it's not just the fact that mainstream everything is pushing degeneracy and Satanism over traditions and things like that. Right. There's an actual scientific electromagnetic explanation for why people are acting like this. But as that is happening, these particles are also destroying the ozone above our heads. Now, this does two things. One, it lets in more ultraviolet light, which has an even bigger effect on the atmosphere. So we have two different ways that storms and weather are getting attacked, one by the particles themselves, and then also by the extra ultraviolet light that is coming in because those particles destroy the ozone. And while our bodies are taking the hit from those same particles, we're also beginning to take extra ultraviolet light that is breaking through, which too much of is bad for us as well. And so in two different ways, it's a climate hit and a biological radiation hit. While these things are going on, we don't have any power at some point. We're basically back to living like cavemen, something that the United States government actually looked into, and they said when this happens, 99% of people are going to be dead in 6 months, and that's globally. And to make matters even worse, birds are not the only things that use Earth's magnetic field for their migrations. Animals use it for other kinds of navigation, finding reproductive zones so they can have children, for foraging so they can eat. And it's half the creatures in the sea, turtles, whales, a million different kinds of fish, sharks, plankton, chlorophyll, shrimp. It's mammals as well, like deer and bear and even wild dogs. Reptiles use it. Every single insect uses Earth's magnetic field. Plants use Earth's magnetic.
This is NASA. All Americans can apply for the 2024 $15,000 debt relief
field, along with signatures of ultraviolet light to know when to make seeds, when to flower, when to germinate, all of this stuff. So literally up and down the food chain, we're getting hits everywhere, while we're getting a double dose of climate chaos, while we are getting a double dose of electromagnetic biological impacts. And the animal kingdom is losing its mind all around us because it can't navigate. It doesn't know what's going on. And all the while, we have to figure out how to live like cavemen, where we can't just turn on a faucet or drive to the store or order something on Amazon anymore. If there's a problem, you can't call anyone for help. It's on you. Oh, it's 110 degrees where you are today? Find some shade. Good luck. Oh, it's negative 45 degrees where you are today? Hope you have a lot of firewood. Oh, you're in the middle of a big city when this all goes down? I hope you're the biggest, strongest, and you have the most bullets of anyone. Otherwise, you're never getting out. Because I'll tell you what, inside the cities, the food and the water disappear more quickly, and the violence starts more quickly as well. So does that answer your question? That's what we have coming here in the next decade or two.
Wonderful. Okay, so you say that the magnetic, the cocoon, the protection would be weakened, and so this would allow for these events to happen. Would it, with the poles shifting, would it strengthen back up at some point, and how long would that take?
It does. It does. This happens to a small degree every 6,000 years, and then every other cycle, every 12,000 years, it's a really big one. But the worst of it only lasts a week to a couple of weeks, and then we recharge back up and things go back to normal. In fact, probably even a little better than normal. There are stories of the last 4 or 5 cycles recorded on the Indian subcontinent, and at least the last 2 cycles in both China and from Australian Aboriginals. And they all describe basically a week or 2 of hell on earth, followed instantly by a golden age.
So we would just have to survive those couple of weeks and not be radiated to death.
That's the worst of it, yes, but we also have to survive up until then. So, for example, Earth's magnetic field is already weakening and weakening and weakening as the poles are shifting. We may go all the way until the late 2040s and then have all of this happen, or the sun could take out power to the whole planet and burn down every building next week, and then we have about a decade or 2 to figure out how to live like cavemen and not die from the elements, not die from starvation, not die because some other desperate human killed us, or we're looking for food in the woods and we get attacked and eaten by a bear. And then we have the zenith of the catastrophe 10, 15, 20 years later. And so, okay, yes, the worst of it's only going to be that, but what if the sun throws a big solar flare at us next week? And we're back in the Stone Age for 20 years and then have to deal with Earth's magnetic pole shift. So in terms of thinking about this, getting ready for this, maybe you should do what the governments and the world billionaires have been very quietly doing for several years already, which is preparing for this to happen. You know, there's a reason why Elon Musk is so focused on going up and digging down. One of his billion-dollar businesses is the Boring Company.
Yeah.
You know, Richard Branson, Virgin Galactic. Not too many of those Virgin Galactic things that can make it to space still fly, but the 2 that I know of for sure that still can, they're in the exact same place, and beneath the control tower is Richard Branson's $45 million bunker. Jeff Bezos, he is hollowing out a mountain in New Mexico, and across the street is his Blue Origin launch facility. And if you were to dump a lake right on top of both of those things, where that water would drain to is where he has his $300 million super yacht that he calls the Black Pearl. These are not coincidences. There's a reason why governments are digging underground like crazy, and it seems like they are spending like there's no tomorrow. I wonder if they know something we don't.
Yeah.
Acting so recklessly with reckless abandon because they know that reckoning is right around the corner. That's sort of where you have to come with all of this. And as you sort of alluded to earlier, or maybe you were just asking the question and we're just very, very luckily on point, during the worst of it, during the zenith of this, the Earth absolutely turns like this. And there's lots of evidence for this. My favorite one has to do with the mammoths. Have you heard of the mammoths that they dug out of the ice near the Arctic? And
yeah.
They were frozen so quickly that the food didn't digest in their mouths and stomachs. You know, everybody asks the wrong question when they hear about those things. Everybody asks a question that doesn't make any sense to me. Everybody asks, how do you freeze a mammoth so quickly to halt chemical digestion in its mouth and its stomach? And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, that's not the right question. The right question is, what were they eating? Because we're 12,000 years into a warm, dare I say, hot interglacial cycle. 12,000 years out of the ice age, okay? And they still had to dig those things out of 20, 30 feet of ice. Mm-hmm. They were frozen in the glacial period when it was 10, 20, 30 degrees colder, and they need 1,000 pounds of vegetation a day. So if here we are, 12,000 years into a hot period, and they dug them out of that much ice, what was it like there 12, 15,000 years ago, whenever they were frozen, there was no way there was any grass there. There's no way there was any plants for them to be eating. What were they doing there in the first place? And of course, the answer is the Earth looked like this, the equator about here, and then it went like this, and they all froze.
Uh-huh.
It's the same reason why, let me pull this back, in Scandinavia, Finland, Norway, Sweden, whenever they dig up a forest that was frozen and covered by glaciers at some point past 12,000 years ago, the trees have no rings. Do you know what tree rings are? Those are the seasons. Now, there's a place on Earth right now where trees grow with no rings, and that's called the equator, because it's the same season year-round, which tells us that part of the world, Norway, Finland, Sweden, used to be near the equator. There's a classified mission called Project Nanook from the 1940s. The United States government was worried that Russia was going to come over the top, come over the North Pole and attack. So we worked out a deal with Canada to come up to here and start figuring out how to operate as a military up here. And one of the things they had to do, because back then all navigation was with a compass, right? They had to figure out where the magnetic pole is, and they figured out it was moving a little bit, so they started digging down into the ice to learn more. And the first thing they found was a layer of polar fossils, kind of what you'd expect, but right underneath it was tropical fossils, and then polar, tropical, polar, tropical. And that only works if the planet is tilting 90 degrees to put it at the equator and then bringing it back, and then putting it at the equator and bringing it back. There's several other lines of evidence we could look to, like all the ones that convinced Albert Einstein that the planet does this. He actually died trying to figure out the math and physics of how that tilt works. He had been convinced it happens. He was just, okay, how does it happen? And he died not figuring that out. He never looked at Earth's magnetic field or the sun or any of the stuff that we know about now. He didn't have that information. Humans didn't really know it. But all of this information suggests this is what happens to our planet. And it's exactly what is told in all the ancient stories as well. What
First Rolex in the bag. So I've been doing this for around 6 weeks now. My life has been...
which I do believe have a little more history than they're given credit for. You know, things like myth and religious texts. I think that there's some history in there. They remember things that they saw and stories that were passed down, and they weren't something somebody just made up. The earth swaying to and fro like a drunkard. Everybody's heard that one from the Bible, but how about chapter 65 of the book of Enoch? The first line is, "And Noah saw the earth turned over and knew its destruction was near." These things are found in nearly every myth, with the great flood, which is caused by the ocean sloshing around as the planet goes like this and basically dumping onto continents. I mean, imagine you've got a full glass, like all the way full to the top, and then you start going like this. Yeah. Water's going to spill out everywhere. So that's essentially what's on our bingo card here before 2050.
So how long does it take for the shift to go 90 degrees? Is that like it happens in a day? One day. It literally just flips in a day.
Yes.
How is that possible? I mean, I would think it would just slowly turn, but you're saying it just goes whoop, flips, just like that.
Whenever you have something that is spinning, okay, if it is not perfectly homogeneous, so let's say it's made out of paper mache, except for one little thing up here that's lead, okay, so obviously that part would weigh the most. If it is spinning, eventually it's going to want that heaviest thing to be at the point of greatest centrifugal force. This is a basic physics principle of things that spin. Well, what is that on the Earth? It's where ice has dumped north and south. That wants to be at the equator right now. Right now, the North and South poles want, from a physics perspective, to be here. That's what they want right now. The reason they're not like that right now is because the crust and the mantle are locked together. And that's what's going to change during the zenith of this event. The crust will be unlocked from the mantle. And then whenever we have that in physics, once it starts to move, it only takes one rotation for that to get down to the center, and it just stays there. Stops perfectly. As soon as it gets to where it's supposed to be, it stabilizes the entire system. So, one rotation here on our planet is 1 day. You just apply the basic physics principle once the crust is unlocked from the mantle, and yeah, it'll be 1 day. And then, of course, afterwards, we have a new North and South Pole that are gaining ice, and then 12,000 years later, when the crust is unlocked in this next event, it tilts exactly 90 degrees again in one rotation, in 1 day.
Okay, where does the United States end up? Do we know which way it's tilting? Is it going, are we going to end up in the North Pole or the South Pole? Okay.
Einstein did that math. So basically, if you have a globe, take Greenland like this, and tilt Greenland to the equator-ish until India is up on top and South America is at the bottom. And what it's going to look like is the United States is in the southern hemisphere now, okay? And basically Canada and Mexico switch climates, Florida and Maine switch climates, Texas and Montana switch climates, places like Pennsylvania, some of the I states, where I am in Colorado, we're basically at the same latitude, just in the south. You know, and you know, if I want a beach vacation, I'm gonna have to look in what is now northern Canada. Maybe the Hudson Bay will be the new great beach destination. Granted, we won't have any way to get there, and they'll have no way to promote their tourism industry because we're going to be living in caveman times again. But still, you want to tour and go see, you know, ice and skiing and stuff. I'm sure they're going to have some great skiing in Mexico once they invent skiing again. Somebody's going to have to reinvent skiing. But once they do, there's going to be great skiing in Mexico from all of this.
Okay, and when do you think this shift happens? Is this what you're thinking happens before 2050?
Yeah.
Really? So what are you doing to prepare? Are you preparing?
Yes, I am. We have a survival community. That's the other thing. You can't do this by yourself. Lone wolfing it is not a good option. You need a group of like-minded people who know what's coming. We're all on the same page in terms of what we need to grow food-wise, the animals we need to take care of, the plan for defending our area, the plan if we have to abandon our area, plan for childbirth, plan for child education, plan for resource management, all these other things. Basically replanning civilization from stage one. And then keeping our eyes on the ball, on everything that's going on, so it doesn't sneak up on us a little too quickly.
Okay, so you and I, since I'm in Idaho and you're in Colorado, we'll be okay as far as the climate goes. We're not going to freeze over or burn up too much, right?
I just wouldn't get caught in downtown Boise when this whole thing happens. I try to avoid downtown Boise when this goes down.
Okay. So interesting. Where can people go to start preparing for this? Do you have a community? You said you have a community. Is there like a website they can go to look into how to prepare?
When I say I have a community, I mean there is a private group of individuals who is separately with me planning, and it's about a quarter mile that way. Is where the majority of it's going to be. But people need to be aware, first and foremost. They need to fully understand what's coming. And then they need to just resign themselves to the fact that no more naps, no more sleep. Like, you got to have eyes open and be paying attention now for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean you don't actually get to sleep at night. It means you don't get to go back to forgetting that this exists. While you're going to classes, while you're going to your job, while you're taking care of your family, you now have another job. And if you don't like that, guess what? Only the strong survive. I'll see you in the afterlife if you can't hack it.
Yeah. Okay, so what should governments be doing? I mean, here they are pushing to go all electric all the time.
Nothing.
Well, should they maybe like get us away from electricity? That seems like that would be the first step, to not rely only on electricity.
I'm not sure how we got here as a species, but the people who are in charge are by far the most corrupt and dumbest people on the planet. I don't want them doing anything. They're idiots. They're complete idiots, and they're corrupt, and they'll just make it worse than they already are. Kind of like what they're about to try to do to climate change.
Yeah. Well, actually,
they're just going to make everything worse.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Bill Gates, there was big reports that came out that Bill Gates is trying to, there's experiments to dim the sun will be approved within weeks. Scientists consider brightening clouds to reflect sunshine among ways to prevent runaway climate change. So they're looking to dim the sun in order to prevent climate change. What could possibly go wrong? We don't need the sun. But then again, with what you're describing, maybe this would be a good thing. I mean, would it be good to dim the sun so that we're protected from?
This is a horrifyingly bad idea. A horrifyingly bad idea. They have no idea what they're doing. The physics that is in their models about how the atmosphere works are complete nonsense. And so the actual effects of what they're going to do are not going to be what they think they are. The most likely thing is a dramatic overcorrection and a freeze out of the atmosphere, combined with a poisoning of everything that is down here on the surface when that eventually comes down and we breathe it in and it lands on the ground and it starts ruining the soil where our crops grow, and it's blocking out the part of ultraviolet light that makes our bodies produce vitamin D. They're trying to kill as many humans as possible.
Well, that's what it seems. I mean, it just seems like this is a bad idea.
It's a much bigger version of what they did during COVID. Okay? Gyms closed. Going outside and getting sunlight, making vitamin D, nope, not on a beach, not allowed to do it. Liquor stores, strip clubs, you can stay open.
Right.
They hate you. And I don't mean you personally. I mean all of you.
I think they also hate me personally, but right.
Well, but they hate us, because here's the thing. We're here talking, right? Humans survived this every couple thousand years. We're tough. Everybody alive today is descended from a survivor. It's in our DNA. And they know that billions of people are going to survive this next one. Or at least tens of millions or hundreds of millions are going to survive somehow. And they would rather the entire species go extinct than be anywhere other than the top of the pyramid. Their best way to do that is, one, kill as many of us as humanly possible. Two, control as much resource and land and power as they possibly can up until this event happens, which is where everything from our loss of freedom with the Patriot Act to them controlling what we buy and where we go and how we move and how we interact with climate policy or digital currencies, things like that. It is all an attempt to, one, distract us so we don't see what's coming. And better yet, if we blame humans for what's going on, that's perfect for them. If we're blaming humans, whether it's dimming the sun or cow farts or your SUV releasing CO2, they win. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter who you're blaming and in what way, but as long as you blame people, they win.
Yeah. Because
it keeps us away from knowing what's actually happening. And we just keep demanding health and demanding safety and this because of fears that they're injecting into us. And then they're like, sure, we will provide that. We just need you to give up a little bit of your freedom here.
Yeah.
Oh, and just a little bit more here. And pay a little bit more in taxes here. And, you know what? We're gonna just say this whole area here, people aren't going to be allowed to go there. That's now a reserve for nature. This would be the land use map for Agenda 2020, which is now Agenda 2030. But of course, that's where they plan to go to survive this stuff. They just don't want us there when this all happens. And so I don't remember what your actual question was, but that
Oh, it's
really
about
sent me
Bill
off
Gates.
on a tangent.
Yeah,
didn't
no,
it?
Bill Gates dimming
Oh,
the
yeah.
sun, which is just like the worst
Bill
idea.
Gates.
I just can't believe that we would even allow for some billionaire to go and try to mess
Well,
with the sun.
When
Like,
it
that's a
comes
good
to
idea.
Bill Gates, I mean, people have tried to debunk that thing he said about vaccines. I've gone and watched the entire thing. He absolutely said we need to control the population, the number of people, through vaccines, that we can reduce the population through vaccines. And, people have tried to say, well, he didn't really mean that. What he meant was, no, complete and total nonsense. They meant exactly, they tell us what they're going to do, and then they do it. And this is their goal, and this is one of the parts of it. If they succeed in this weather modification effort to dim the sun, they're going to kill 1 billion people. There will be famines and unbelievable immune dysfunction due to lack of vitamin C, rampant in the world within a year if they actually do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's full of great ideas. Also, using mosquitoes to vaccinate people, right, against their will. And it's just
Well,
the dystopia.
I'm worried they're going to put some kind of a vaccine in what they're spraying in
Yeah.
the sky or in the water supply. Or they're already putting mRNA stuff in pig meat, and they're going to start doing it to cows as well. Half the population out there eating the regular store-bought bacon is already taking in mRNA technology just as they eat.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I mean, certainly we have to be really aware of it. It's great that you're so aware of it. You're clearly telling people to be aware of it. We need to be more aware of it so that we can then try to push back and stop it somehow. But it does feel like it's a bit of a runaway train. And that they're just already in control. So I think that there's a lot of communities out there who are preparing and trying to, like disaster-proof themselves, or the preppers or whatever. And I've always been one myself, being from Idaho. The state is kind of filled with preppers. We're kind of taught this from childhood to prepare for, any catastrophe, from 72 hours and having your 72-hour kit ready to go to, a year's supply of food in the pantry, because you never know what's going to happen. But more people, I think, need to get into that mentality, because it does look like there's just a lot of stuff, from natural things like the magnetic pole shifting to unnatural things, very unnatural dystopian things like Bill Gates trying to control the population and the sun.
Oh,
now.
yeah. There's
Talk about playing God.
It's not the time to be lackadaisically going through your life right now. It's a time for hypervigilance and awareness right now. And that'll end when you take your last breath. We're in it for the duration at this point.
All right. Well, Ben Davidson, Space Weather News, thank you so much for being here. Your YouTube channel is great. I know we do have the link down below for people, so you're clearly, libertarian-minded. It sounds to me, which is much of my audience here that are watching. Also, a very fascinating subject. I mean, what other type of stuff do you cover on your channel? What other types of things are you diving into?
I cover everything from major geophysical trends like earthquakes or volcanic activity. I obviously pay attention to the climate, and also pay attention to things in astrophysics that could be applied to the sun as well, just in an everlasting attempt to see that big solar flare coming, even just a couple minutes to an hour or two early. You can't even imagine what that would benefit people, to have that much extra time. It'll be the difference between life and death for almost everybody who has an extra hour of time or an hour of awareness to actually do something. So we're basically all in on this and the related peripheral aspects of it.
Ben, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your time.
Hey, thank you, Kim. It was a pleasure.
Well, that was so fascinating and scary, unfortunately. But, we have to face, I guess, the reality of things that are happening. And certainly, I think what happened in Spain, Portugal, and France just yesterday was a big warning sign for a lot of people. In fact, I want to read to you a post. This is from Luis Gariciano. And this, I don't know if I pronounced his name right. I apologize. But he says, back online, still no light here. Lessons from Spain after a really weird day. No electricity, no 4G, no Wi-Fi for the world. 1, go out and buy a pocket battery power radio. It's really disconcerting to have no way to know what is going on. So these are just some tips. Go and get yourself a battery powered radio or a wind-up radio of some kind. 2, buy a battery powered torch. There were none left in the shops. 3, keep cash. I had none. And 4, keep spare batteries. So those are some tips that are coming out of those who have been enduring the lack of electricity suddenly in Europe. Just good to know these things. Good to know these tips. All right, guys, that is it for tonight's show. Thank you so much for joining. Really appreciate you being here. We'll be back tomorrow with another great show, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. We're going to be.
Hey, folks, Donald Trump Jr. here with urgent news. The world